Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is March the 14th, a little after 10:30. We're supposed to have Agricultural and Natural Resources Subcommittee at this time. So we are now in order. Chairman, Kyle, please take the roll.
Representative Fritz, Representative Halsey, Representative Jones, Representative Reedy, Representative Shaw, Representative Todd, Representative Travis, Vice Chairman Darby, Chairman Grills.
Here.
Chairman Grills, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Kyle, for that. If you would, at this time, Representative Jones is going to lead us in the prayer and the pledge to our flag. Please stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let us pray.
Thank you, Representative Jones. Do we have any personal orders this morning? And good to see you, Mr. Johnny.
Good to be here.
First off, I'll introduce a new constituent that I have picked up over the past 6 months. Everybody knows Stephen Maupin. He used to work for Farm Bureau. Now he is working for the Tennessee Soybean Association. It is so good to see you here today, and I'll be happy to go eat lunch with you right after this. Anybody else have any personal orders? Representative Jones?
I just see one of my friends and fellow ministers when I was in the United Methodist Church, Reverend Ingrid McIntyre from Belmont United Methodist Church. I want to recognize for being here today. Thanks for being here.
Stephen, you notice they clap for her, but not for you. Hope you don't have a shallow or thin skin. All right, let's get going here. First off on our calendar, we have HB 0980 by Chairman Terry. We have a motion and a second. You are properly before the committee and are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman and committee, and I would like to thank you guys for working with me and talking, particularly the chairman, talking about the issues, and particularly the Solid Waste Authority. And I think that we have come up with a solution other than legislation, but it's going to require a private act from my city. They have a meeting scheduled this Thursday. Unfortunately, in order for them to get the resolution, me to get that on notice, it'll be 2 weeks.
Sure.
This is the third time with this bill, and so it's either going to have to, with y'all's indulgence, let me go to full, park it there, don't touch it, and go with the private act, or it's going to be on your calendar and you'll have to see me again here next week. So I do have an amendment that does fix the chairman's concerns about the bracketing, if you guys would like to put that on. And
let's go ahead and put that amendment on the bill. If we can get a motion and a second on the amendment.
5320.
And the drafting code is 5320?
Yes.
Okay, that's the same one I have. We have a motion and a second on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? On the bill, the amendment's on the bill. Now we're back on the bill as amended. And you really, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place here. We need to either do something with it or, Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Terry, you have been phenomenal to work with, as you always are. You're always working for your community, trying to meet their needs and to address their concerns, and extremely diligent. And I think they know that and they see that. That's why they keep sending you back up here. So, and we appreciate that because we value your perspective on so many things. And knowing what your situation is and working with them to get this private act, Mr. Chairman, I would move to roll this bill as amended to the 2024 year.
Hold on. He was asking to send it to full is what he
I'm
was.
sorry, I'm sorry. Yes. I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay. Duly noted.
I do not withdraw my comments though on you though. You do a great job. Thank you.
I want to echo that too. We've talked about it several times since I've been here about the solid waste issues and the different things that are going on in Middle Tennessee. And there is several people that have committed to have several conversations throughout the summer to address the rising demand and the infrastructural needs here in Middle Tennessee and all across Tennessee. And obviously, Chairman Terry, you'll be involved with that, I'm certain. But there will be some conversations that we had this summer to address that. If we, are you, Chairman Reedy?
I'll speak on it, and of course, I think the committee here, if they agree with me, is go ahead and move this out, and like the chairman said, there is taking park it in Ag Full, and we'll continue this conversation for another day.
Second that motion.
Okay, we have, question has been called on the bill, is the way I understand it. Question has been called on the bill. Any objections? All in favor of sending House Bill 980 to full committee, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? On to full. See you next week in full.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
Now, next we have on our list HB 0523. We have a motion and a second, but we do not have anyone here. Chairman Hastings is not here to present the bill. Chairman Todd?
Mr. Chairman, I move to roll this to next year.
Without objection, we'll roll to next year. We rolled it till next year, and now we're up on House Bill 842 by Representative Lynn. We have a motion and a second. You are properly before the committee. Representative Lynn, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some prepared remarks, and then there's some folks here who would like to speak on the bill, if that's okay.
That would be great.
Thank you. In summary, this bill allows for the state to not require the same restrictions for meat as the FDA does. It allows meat producers to label the meat as vaccine mRNA free and allows producers to label the meat as Tennessee meat made in Tennessee. But aside from that, mRNA vaccines for many types of livestock are in development, and at least one mRNA vaccine has been licensed and has been used in the United States since 2018. Subcommittee from Merck Animal Health is an RNA particle technology, another way of saying mRNA, and it is being used on swine. The USDA lists no studies on the safety of RNA vaccine on swine health beyond 21 days post-vaccination, and they list no studies on swine fertility or the safety of the meat from vaccinated animals. Federal rules currently require a mandatory withdrawal period when vaccines are used in food animals to ensure that meat, milk, and other products for human consumption from the vaccinated animal are free from adjuvant or vaccine organism contamination. RNA vaccines encode antigen genes of an infectious agent directly in the animal cells. If safety or withdrawal studies on the meat from RNA vaccinated animals are being done, they are not being made easily available to the public. What are the risks to the food chain with mRNA? What about egg and milk products? RNA has been detected in human breast milk in women given an mRNA vaccine. Lipid nanoparticles are a delivery mechanism, and they are used in the animal vaccines. If they are used in the animal vaccines, there is potential for harm. Lipid nanoparticles are highly inflammatory, capable of causing severe adverse reactions. They easily bypass the blood-brain barrier. Once injected, they travel everywhere and to every organ. In September 2022 study, in animals given an mRNA vaccine carried by lipid nanoparticles, It showed the animals became more resistant to some infections, which would be good, but less able to fight off other infections, and they pass immune traits onto their offspring. The authors concluded that, quote, our studies highlight the need for more research to determine this platform's true impact on human health. Determining this platform's short and long-term impact on human health would help optimize it to decrease its potentiality for human effects. Before the human COVID-19 shots were given emergency use authorization, the FDA and CDC created adverse events of special interest list based on the known science. Those adverse reactions have been showing up in record numbers in the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, VAERS, and include things like myocarditis, autoimmune disorders, neurological disorders, nervous system disorders, seizures, strokes, vaccine-enhanced disease, reproductive disorders, and more. But what does this mean for animal health? Are we jeopardizing herds and flocks? Well, we don't know. We don't know if the animals will suffer, if our food supply will suffer, if our own health will suffer from consuming their meat, or from reduction in animal supply, should it jeopardize reproduction. But unlike human vaccines, there is no VAERS database for veterinarian vaccine trials and no equivalent vaccine adverse event reporting system. Nothing is transparent, and information is difficult, if not impossible, to find. We have already been harmed in some ways from consuming pork from a pig injected with Merck's RNA vaccine. That is a question. Have we already been harmed? We simply don't know. The science has not been done. So with that, Mr. Chairman and committee, I ask for your indulgence if we could hear from some folks who are here to speak on the bill.
All right, we have a motion to go out of session. We're out of session, and we have on our list Mr. Clay Mayfield, a farmer, and we also have the Department of Ag, Carol McDonald, Dr. Samantha Beatty. Dr. Beatty, would you like to come up first? I talked to you earlier on, if you'd like to. And Ms. Carol? I don't know if Mr. Mayfield is here yet. Okay, I don't see him, so we may just hear from you, Dr. Beatty. If you would, go ahead and state your name and give us about 3 minutes of wherever you would like. Give us about 3 minutes, and then we'll take some, if you don't mind, answering a few questions from the committee, and we'll let you out of here. Thank you.
Okay, just making sure I was on. Yeah, my name is Dr. Samantha Beatty. I am your state veterinarian. I work with the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, and my job is to promote and protect the health of animals. And also, that has a direct influence on the health and welfare of people. And I'm open to any questions that you have, or if you...
We'll just go down that road then. Representative Jones, we'll let you go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From my understanding, the Part 2 of this bill will make it so that the Department of Agriculture can't require any vaccines at all. Is that true?
That is my understanding of the bill as it is written, but I am not a legal
No worries, yeah.
person, so that
No
would
worries.
what I've read, yeah.
Well, thank you. Just wanted to have that background. And so from your understanding, what would this do for public health if we are not vaccinating and for the health of livestock? How will this impact the health of agriculture in Tennessee and the health of people as well?
So currently, we don't require anybody to vaccinate for anything, really. That is a very specific scenario, and I can only describe it as apocalyptic. And we would only require vaccination as part of a response to an emergency disease like foot and mouth disease, which impacts all cloven-hooved animals. Or if there is a vaccine developed for African swine fever, we would implement that. And it wouldn't be necessarily statewide. The plan is for ring vaccination if we can localize an area that's infected to try to protect the animals that are outside of that. To give you an example of how this has impacted other countries, in 2018, China had African swine fever introduced to their population. China produced 433 million head of pigs that year. The United States, by comparison, produced 78 million. So you can think about that. That's a population of people who are largely dependent on pork as a source of protein. By the end of that year, there was estimates, at least admitted estimates, of approximately 50% of their swine population was decimated. For us, that's over more than our country produced. There currently is no vaccine. There are vaccines being developed. They think they're very close to finding one, but it changed the way a whole continent ate food. They're the number one or one of the top 3 importers of beef now. Before 2018, they never imported beef. So you're talking about the ability to protect the food supply.
Representative Jones.
My other question, just because I don't think any of us here are veterinarians or not really scientists, but the science behind vaccines of livestock. So when these livestock get some type of vaccine, does it metabolize before? So, would these vaccines would not be directly consumed by people? Would there be a process of metabolization where before it enters our food source, or how does that science work?
Dr. Beatty?
Yes, sir, thank you. So all vaccines are designed to create some type of inflammation because it stimulates your immune system to create a response that it can memorize. If you've had chicken pox, you know that you probably haven't had it the second time, right? And that's because you have memory cells in your immune system that learned that that was a bad thing, and it prevents you from getting it again. And not all diseases are that straightforward, but this technology, essentially, messenger RNA is a translator. It doesn't insert itself into the DNA of the organism. It doesn't change the nucleus, or the nucleolus, which is the brain of the cell. What it does is it simply takes the mapping or the programming and takes it to something called a ribosome, and that ribosome makes protein. Well, what this technology allows us to do is to use the body's own immune system to make this little protein that will trigger an immune response to protect us, versus having to give us a killed organism, so, growing a bacteria that you have to destroy before you inject it, because all we're talking about is a reaction to protein. And so the idea is that we don't have to give you a modified live, or we don't have to give you the actual organism. It's that we can use a snippet, just a short chain of amino acids, to get the same effect. And we don't have to grow and culture nasty things in labs and keep them on hand necessarily so that we can replicate that immune response.
Representative Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My final question. Do you or the Department of Agriculture have a position on this bill? Are you supporting it or are you against it?
Dr. Beatty?
Can I defer to Carol McDonald, please?
That would be fine. Ms. McDonald, you're recognized.
Hello, committee. Carol McDonald, Department of Ag. Yes, we are flagged on this bill, so we're opposed to the bill.
Thank you. Representative Hosey or Chairman Hosey?
Thank you, and thanks, Doc, for being here. I wrestle with this bill a whole lot. I don't like property owners, cattle owners, hog owners, for the state to meddle in their business and tell them what they can and can't do. But I share Chairman Lynn's concern over this particular vaccine for several reasons. Some of the things that you described, of course, I have seen a whole lot of horror stories. In fact, dealing with one personally right now with somebody back in my hometown that is actually, while we're meeting here, they are at a doctor's appointment with a neurologist over some real serious issues that have come on since they took both those shots and the booster that went with it. And this group of doctors have tied it, what this person's dealing with, to that shot. That part concerns me because after everything we've been through, that shot does not prevent the disease from coming. It doesn't prevent you from getting it. It doesn't prevent you from shedding it. It doesn't prevent you from dying from it. So from Chairman Lynn's perspective, that troubles me, and it scares me that if you go down the road with an experimental vaccine and it has the same success as the COVID-19 vaccine, then it doesn't prevent death in cattle or hogs, and it doesn't prevent them from shedding it. It doesn't prevent them from getting it. That troubles me a great deal, and the fact that it's unknown and experimental troubles me as well. And again, I wrestle with, I don't like telling cattle owners what they can and can't do. And is the biggest issue with you with this bill the part in it that says that takes away the ability of your office to say under these circumstances, yeah, you must get a vaccine? Is that it? And the other side of that is with hoof and mouth. Did you say there was no existing vaccine that deals with that at this point?
Dr. Beatty?
Yeah, I can answer that. Thank you, sir. There is a vaccine data, or a bank of vaccines for foot and mouth disease. There are 8 different serivars of that particular disease, and so we can't bank enough to protect the whole United States. So in an emergency, it will be a multifactorial response, and part of what I do is work with other state veterinarians and the federal USDA Veterinary Services folks, boots on the ground guys, to develop a strategy around what's going to happen if these diseases become introduced to our soil. And so those vaccines are held at the National Veterinary Stockpile and would be distributed to areas where they have detected the disease to try to vaccinate around that location. Those vaccines are not mRNA vaccines, but they are important because foot and mouth disease has a pre-patent period of up to 14 days. So if we find it, we want to stop movement of animals who are asymptomatic but carrying the disease from going to Nebraska or from other states. I think it's pretty fascinating to know that in Tennessee, we receive swine from 36 states and another country every day. So that's how fluid the movement of animals is and how quickly a disease can spread. And then back to, if you can repeat the first part of your question, my objection to the bill or my perspective on the bill was around restricting that. That's what, can you repeat that
Chairman
part?
Hulsey?
If that piece wasn't in there, would you be comfortable with the bill? The rest of it deals with labeling, doesn't it?
Dr.
No,
Beatty?
sir, I would not be comfortable with the bill.
Okay.
Representative Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Doctor, for being here. Couple of things. Would these farmers be producing for human consumption?
Dr. Beatty?
So I can only speak to what is being used currently, and those vaccines are specifically for sows, and those animals in the food chain go into sausage production if they pass ante-mortem inspection. If they develop vaccines that are used in animals like beef or chicken or something like that, then yes, potentially those vaccines could be used in animals who would enter the food chain as protein.
Representative Shaw?
So if I take my family out for Friday night dinner and this producer's meat is on the market and one of my family members gets sick, I guess you probably can answer this, but then I guess I would ask who would be responsible for that if this bill were to pass.
Dr. Beatty?
Yeah. I do not have the legal knowledge to be able to say who would be liable, but I can say I am a producer. My husband and I raise cattle in Robertson County, and so I do have a producer's perspective as well as a veterinarian's, and also as a consumer.
I just have a closing comment. My business is totally something different, but the government tells me what to do. I guess my question is, why is it that some people want to be able to do whatever they want to do and other folks have to abide by what the government says? I'm not asking you to respond, but I have to respond to what the government says in my business. And I think that we don't even need a Department of Agriculture if they, they do weights, they do measurements, they do safety, they do a whole lot of things. But why would we have such a department and pay them what we pay them if they can't do their jobs? I just personally, I think that when a person don't want to abide by the rules, they ought to get out of the business. That's my comment.
Okay.
I would agree with that, sir. My job is to enforce the rules of government as legislated by these groups, by our legislators and our senators. And as of now, that bill has not passed, but if that is my job, that's what I do. It's not about necessarily my personal opinion, how I do my job as state veterinarian, although I do have a passion for animal agriculture and for feeding people.
Thank you for that. And to my friend from West Tennessee, our job is to set policy and to pass those rules and those regulations. So that's what we're trying to do here today. Representative Fritz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for coming. I appreciate what you do for the great state of Tennessee. And I do appreciate the Department of Agriculture, and I'd probably be one of those people to support that we probably need to look at pay rates because you all have your hands full with what you're keeping up with. So I do support what you're doing, but I do have some tough questions for you. I'll go back to what my grandmother told me when I was a little boy. She said, son, you are what you eat. Is that true from a veterinary perspective?
I can only think about it from my perspective, which is a scientist, which is through the digestive process, we break down most of what we eat into minuscule particles. And as we consume them, they're not necessarily incorporated into our DNA. And I think you have to weigh risk versus benefit. And I think any time that you take a vaccine, you have to decide if that risk is worth it for you or not, and versus the outcome of what the potential disease might be. And so, but from a scientific perspective, if you think about what you digest, it goes through pretty serious acid digestion, base digestion. And so I'm not sure that you can absorb that mRNA particle and incorporate it into your DNA. I'm actually positive it doesn't become part of who I am. Like the 2 strands of DNA that my parents gave me are still the 2 strands. And this particular vaccine doesn't alter that. It just tells a ribosome how to make a protein that teaches my immune system to do its job. And I think if you look at vaccines historically as a group, you would see similar reactions. There's always going to be that segment of the population who responds negatively. And the part of that is deciding, does the risk outweigh the benefit or not? And I think what we have to look at from our perspective too is isolating ourselves as a state and making protein lists available to our consumer, because there are 49 other markets and international markets that people can choose to send their product to, right? And if we go through the step of asking them to create a label specifically for us, they're either going to refuse to do it or they're going to bump up the price. And the consumer is going to pay for that. And so we're actually removing a resource for cheap, available protein that is healthy. I'm sorry, sir.
Representative Fritz?
Thank you so much. That's great. I appreciate that. You mentioned a couple things that caught my ears. You said not necessarily that it could be transferred over. And so I may have misheard that. But is there any potential for what I eat for dinner that if it has some contaminant or something in it, whatever that something is, that that my body will have an adverse effect to that?
Dr. Beatty?
Potentially, and it's dependent on what it is, right? So carcinogens that are used to preserve food, right? I think that those have been shown to have a detrimental effect. I don't know that they're absorbed into your specific cellular DNA except for those genes or those cells that mutate. If you don't cook your food well and there's contamination from bacteria, certainly there's always that issue. So heat denatures protein, so it also has some ability to damage those things that potentially are transmissible. So I can't say that everything is safe. I think the benefits of having a secure food supply, and there hasn't been a demonstrated negative impact with this food, outweighs the risk. I think, sows go into sausage. So if you've eaten sausage, you've probably consumed it. And in the last 5 years, I don't know that there's been any deleterious adverse effect created from that. Certainly, depending on the doctor you talk to, consuming a lot of red meat is going to cause inflammation, right? But I don't know that it's from an mRNA vaccine. I can tell you what a veterinarian that I talked to about this particular vaccine, who uses it frequently, said, and they don't use it for everything. They use a lot of traditional vaccines for the same old traditional problems, but there are diseases like porcine epidemic diarrhea virus, which went through the Midwest several years ago, and it caused huge production losses. Sows did not have litters, they were dying, and so there's an animal welfare component because the vaccines they had were not effective. Sequivity allows them to vaccinate for that, and it's been much more beneficial. So you don't have the production losses. The sows are healthier, they're not dying. And as far as like output or production of meat and resources for people to consume, it keeps it at a level that doesn't create consumer impact, right? There's more of a supply.
Representative Fritz?
Just a couple more follow-ups. Thank you. I understood that to be a no. Thank you for all the extra answer to that. I appreciate that. One last thing. You talk about weighing risk, and I would think that all of us would want the ability to weigh the risk for that which we consume. And understand, I do understand the need for the greater collective good, but individually, our rights have some importance there to be able to weigh that risk. And sometimes that might mean just allowing something to be denoted on a label. We have pushed for that in all areas of our culture. And so I would just ask, regarding that risk, this question, is there a possibility for that messenger RNA that causes the inflammation and the protein spike to be transferred through a food system into a human body unknowingly by consumption of that meat?
Dr. Beatty?
I would say the answer to that is yes. I haven't sat down and done a tremendous study on the research papers, but I have, I don't get my information from popular culture, but the research that I have seen tells me that it is more advantageous to be able to utilize it. And I mean, if labeling is what the state chooses, then that's the will of the state, and I would enforce that.
Okay. Representative Fritz?
Thank you so much for what you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions too, and I think Representative Halsey has a couple. Are there currently any mRNA vaccines for animals being used here in the United States currently?
Yes, in sows and also in salmon for alpha viruses.
Okay. And what is the process by which those vaccines are deemed safe? And who is that puts their stamp of approval saying that they're safe to use?
So the Center for Veterinary Biologics, the FDA, those are the two groups that come to mind most quickly. I don't know if DEA has an arm in that as well, but we work with the Center for Veterinary Biologics just about every day.
And what is the process by which one is recognized as safe to use? And
they would have to demonstrate to some sort of reasonable amount of certainty that the benefits outweigh the risk, especially in something that may be developing technology. I think after 5 years, most swine producers would say that they feel fairly confident in the ability of this vaccine to do its job without harming the animal. But I can't speak blanketly for them all. I only know the conversations that I've had with a few of them.
so there's not like a standard by which so many years of data or so many hours of research has to be applied, and
There is a standard, but because I don't do that every day,
Okay, I
I'm not
understand.
sure what that is.
well, I don't mean to put you on the spot. That
No,
was
that's
not a
okay.
trick question. It was just strictly for informational purposes. Chairman Halsey?
I just had a follow-up to what Representative Fritz said. if I ingest a sausage from a hog that's been vaccinated with mRNA, that doesn't ever leave my body either. Is that correct?
Dr. Beatty?
I don't know the exact answer to that. My guess is that it is metabolized along with other proteins. Although, as Representative Hahn did mention, that there has been a study that I'm not familiar with where the mRNA was excreted in the breast milk. So I don't want to stand here and purport to be an expert on all of the mechanisms of the way that this vaccine is excreted.
Okay, thank you so much.
Have any other questions? Maybe I want to change gears just for a little bit. You mentioned what went on in China and the epidemic that was with their hog population. Do you have what you need here in Tennessee in case something like that cuts loose and breaks out in Tennessee? Do you have the resources at your disposal to combat such an event as that? That's not
No.
a trick question either. I'm sincerely
No,
wanting-
I do not. I don't know that I ever would, but I'm certainly not in a position to address it now, nor would the next state veterinarian be with similar staffing and equipment.
Well, what can we do as an ag committee to help put you in a better position if something like that? And obviously, these events, they happen. I mean, it's not about them, but when they're going to be here. So, or if, but when. What can we do to better assist you and be in your corner more to help put you in a better spot to be on top of one of these if they do break out?
I think making sure that we are in a position to adequately staff our team and have opportunities to train them outside of just our own abilities. So being able to send them to a foreign animal disease school or being able to send them to a field skills course in Iowa where you get to work with other animal health technicians from other states, because this is not going to be a Tennessee selective response. We know that it's going to probably enter in Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, or Texas. And so we will be, for lack of a better word, throwing up defenses first and probably restricting movement of animals. There'll be a probably 72-hour stop movement, but we have to have the ability to enforce that. And right now, there's not been good communication with the people that we need to do that. We are working on it, but we're talking about requiring the services of an organization like, or the division of the Highway Patrol, the sheriff's departments. We need to be able to do interdiction. We need to be able to, if somebody comes in with a load of pigs from Florida and we know that Florida's hot, we need to be able to turn them around. And I don't have the manpower to do that, nor do my staff have the authority, and they don't want it. We have ag crime unit officers. We don't have nearly enough of those. We rely on them heavily for livestock welfare issues now. And so those are the things that I would see, is that it's mostly about people and training, outreach, and education.
Well, if we have no other questions, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate your time. You spent almost 30 minutes answering questions of us, and I don't think anyone up here, I think everyone up here is happy they were here for those questions and those answers.
Thank you for supporting agriculture. I appreciate the
Thank you,
opportunity.
Dr. Beatty, for all you do. Do we have anyone else? Is Mr. Mayfield here? He is not here, so without objection, we'll go back into session. Representative Lynn, we have a question here, Representative Jones, and then go ahead, Representative Jones.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Representative Lynn, can I ask, where did this legislation come from?
Representative Lynn.
This Senate sponsor.
Representative Jones.
I'm not the originating
Oh,
sponsor.
okay. So there's no organization pushing this, or what? You don't know where Senator Nicely got this bill from?
I do not.
Okay. My second question is, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this in a respectful way. It just seems it sounds like a conspiracy theory, if I'm quite honest. And I think that if we look at this issue, we have an expert who is neutral, who was hired by the state to give us advice, the state veterinarian who's non-political, telling us that this is not a good idea. Do you have any veterinary experience?
I do
Representative
not.
Lynn.
I do not.
Do you have any scientific experience?
I do not.
Okay.
Let's keep.
I'm just wanting to show that we have the state veterinarian who's a scientist, a veterinarian, telling us this is not a good idea. and yet we have politicians here who have, I don't have the expertise, none of my colleagues here have this expertise. You said you don't have the expertise, or saying that maybe it is. And I just hope that we just pause and just will consider that we have this expert telling us that this is a bad idea. And we just asked, where can she support, how can we support her if we have an epidemic, or, an issue like what they had in another country? And I think passing this law will hinder and will tie the hands of our state agriculture department, of our state veterinarian, and it just seems like we are getting in the way. My last question is, it seems like a violation of interstate commerce that we're requiring labeling as a state where this should be done at the federal level. And I know that the Farm Bureau is here, and they talked about this with Subcommitee's bill, that labeling cabbage or whatever we were labeling should be done at the federal level. And so I think that, do you see that this is going to impose on the Interstate Commerce Act and will negatively impact the prices in Tennessee, because we'll have to specifically label goods just in Tennessee, and no other state around us has any law like this. Do you see this?
Representative Lynn?
Thank you very much. This actually doesn't mandate labeling. What it does is it encourages labeling by farmers who have chosen not to use an mRNA vaccine in their meat. That's actually a selling point. There's a market for that. There's people who would like a product like that until we know more. So that's what this bill does.
Chairman Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chair Lady Lynn, I appreciate you in this discussion. I over the years, I've seen you've been in challenging situations with different bills. I appreciate you standing up and fighting for what you're believing in the legislation. And Mr. Chairman and committee, I think we've cracked the door to a very important conversation that we need to have in the state of Tennessee. And so I'd like to make a motion that we do have a summer study, but to move this to summer study, Mr. Chairman. Second motion.
We have a motion and a second to send this to summer study and have a summer study on it this summer. Without objection, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. We're going to summer study.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And also, I want to recognize the witness, Dr. Beatty. There were several opportunities that she had that she could have given a philosophical view, but she stuck to that, and she only stuck with the facts. And I appreciate that coming from a state department, with sticking with the facts and how it was going to affect their department and not getting off in the philosophical weeds. Thank you for that. Now, we have to reconsider our actions on House Bill.
Mr.
Chairman Reedy?
I make a motion we reconsider our action on House Bill 523, sir.
I had a parliamentary inquiry.
What is it?
If the person who made the motion is not in the room, can we go back on his motion?
I believe we can, as long as it's a committee member. The committee will have to vote on it.
Okay.
We have a motion to reconsider our actions. We have a second? Second. We have a second. All in favor of reconsidering our actions on House Bill 523, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We have reconsidered our actions, and we are bringing before you now House Bill 523 by Chairman Hastings. You are recognized, and we have an amendment on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, and for your assistance. Sorry for the confusion earlier. The amendment number that I have is drafting code 004796.
We have a motion on the amendment. We have a second on the amendment. Will it be okay with the committee if we put this amendment on the bill? Because this amendment makes the bill, correct?
Yes.
All in favor of putting the amendment 4796 on the bill, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The amendment is on the bill. Chairman Hastings, you are recognized again. Bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this bill does is it authorizes TDEC to issue an aquatic resource alteration permit to a person in connection with the removal of sand, gravel, and similar sediments or deposits from streams or wetlands. The permit process has been in place for a long time. The main change here is making it where there's a compensation of 2.5% of the market value to the state. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Representative Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hastings, I know that you're the House sponsor, but where did this bill come from? Is there a specific industry? I know that there's been people talking in the hallway, and I saw them talking to you. Is there a specific corporation or business interest that brought you this bill?
Chairman Hastings?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, there's a dredging company in my district that has been operating and supplying jobs for decades. And so they brought this to me because this was concerned because this permit process has been ongoing in a safe and secure way for decades, and they were looking for a way to further that relationship. And this was the terms that they came to an agreement with TDEC.
Representative Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the Senate, this bill was described as saying that there was an issue with who owns the gravel and sand. And so what this bill does is trying to clarify who is the owner once they pay for this, which was public when it was in the river, but then when the company extracts it, that's how it was described in the Senate. So I'm trying to understand the difference, even though it's the same amendment, of how you explained it and how the Senate explained it.
You recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that this bill doesn't change the process from which, what the ownership rights. The state of Tennessee had the ownership claim to this before and after this permit process that was in this bill. So I believe that the Senate explanation would be accurate.
Representative Jones?
Do you recognize any adverse environmental impact that the sand and gravel extraction, when done excessively, will have on our rivers? I did some research on this last night just to prepare for this, since it was a caption bill. I found the amendment, but it talked about how sand is a key ingredient that makes a river, not just water. Sand filters water, recharges groundwater, sustains biodiversity. And if you take away excessive sand from the river, it can drastically change course, cause floods in one place and water scarcity in another. Have you thought about the adverse environmental impacts that this type of permitting, when done excessively, will cause on our natural resources, on our rivers here in the state of Tennessee?
Chairman Hastings?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fact that this has been being done for decades without any adverse effects so far, I think, answers that question. I do know that there's a lot of studies done, on both sides, from the state and from the dredging companies, to make sure that this is done in a safe and secure way. I haven't seen any evidence to show that there's been any major directional shifts or any increased flooding due to this so far.
I know this past year, the Mississippi River got extremely low in my part of the world, and they were having to dredge just so the barges could maintain commerce. And so obviously that was a huge help to my part of the world. Representative Jones, you have a follow-up?
Is TDEC here, since this is impacting their department?
They are here. They are here.
Can we ask a few questions?
Are they on the list? They're not on the list.
Okay.
Representative Jones.
Have you spoken to TDEC about this bill?
Representative Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. TDEC did sign off on this. TDEC this was a negotiated number that they were fine with. I'm sure that they would come by and back me up on that, but this was a negotiated amendment.
Jones.
Thank you. My last question is: it seems like we have these industry interests here seeking to, is this expanding their permit ability to extract sand and gravel from our rivers? And we haven't heard from those who in these communities would be impacted by giving these permits to these industries. And so I just think that, have we talked to people who are impacted, or have you only talked to the industry and business interests who are profiting from this?
Chairman Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the fact that you haven't heard from the communities shows that they are in support of this company in particular that brought this to me. I think that if there was issues in the past, you probably would have been made known of it, and I think that their silence is probably an answer to that.
Chairman Hastings, how long has this company been in operation in your district?
I would say at least 40 years, but it may be longer than that.
The reputation is pretty good, I would assume then.
Yep.
Representative Jones, last question.
Thank you. Why did the company say this legislation is necessary if things have been going for 40 years? What changed, and why would this be necessary now?
Chairman Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, they were working on, they had never, up until this point, the permit process had been approved without any kind of compensation. TDEC was interested in bringing compensation in for the process, and hence this is what I'll read this one more time. The permittee must compensate the state for 2.5% of the market value of the finished product. That had not been done before, and so they wanted to add a compensation element to the permit process.
Now, that's my understanding. The state's going to benefit tremendously off this. Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the indulgence while I went and presented a bill in another committee. I guess I wanted to clarify, because as I understand it, these permits have been issued for literally decades with no discussion of compensation. And this apparently has just been discovered, thought up, I'm not really sure by an attorney, maybe within TDEC of wait a minute, this property in this specific situation may actually belong to the state, and we may have to have some legislation to deal with that, and which is just really struck me as odd. So I was really glad to learn more about this. So I guess I want to clarify that this is only dealing with property that is deeded to the state. If dredging is taking place on property deeded to the state, that this would apply.
Yes, sir, that's my understanding.
Okay, thank you, because I know there's a lot of dredging permits issued across the state, and properties that are public owned, properties that are privately owned, and so I just wanted to make sure exactly what the scope was and clarify that. So thank you, sir.
Question's been called on the bill. Any objections? Seeing no objections, we'll be voting on House Bill 523 as amended to send it to full committee. All in favor say aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
That's your, if you wish to be recognized as a no, let the clerk know. On to full.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
That is that was all we have on our calendar today. I had some folks come in that were 911 from Dyer and Obion counties. I was going to recognize them, but since they're gone, we won't. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.